Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and if I could be any cartoon character from my childhood, it would definitely be Quail Man. All right, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to helping you grow your photography skills. Raymond interviews the world's top photographers in their field to ask questions that will get you taking better photos today. Now, with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back. I am Raymond Hatfield. I'm an Indianapolis wedding photographer and host of the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm super excited to have you guys here today. Today's interview is something a little bit different from the traditional, but I think it perhaps could be the future. So I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. But first, I wanted to share a story from this past weekend's wedding. This past weekend was a couple I was really excited to shoot. Super nice, super fun. And the couple had a sparkler exit that they wanted me to shoot, right? So they had me for a total of 8 hours. So if they wanted me to stay to the end, they just subtracted the 8 hours. And then, so basically what that means is that when I showed up, it was almost time for the ceremony. There was no getting ready photos that they did. They didn't want any getting ready photos because they really wanted that sparkler exit, okay? So when I first got there, we had about an hour of time before the ceremony. So what the couple wanted to do is that they wanted to do a first look. The bride wanted to do a first look with her soon-to-be husband and her father, okay? So we did the first look, and it was great, right? We did both first looks, and it was wonderful. But they took up pretty much all of that first hour. Okay, so then we had the ceremony that was at 4 p.m. and the ceremony lasted until 4:30, and then immediately afterwards we did family photos and then just a few bridal party shots as well before we all got into our cars and decided to go to where the reception was being held to take the rest of the bridal portraits, because there was a nice little lake there and just it was just a better location for photos. So at this point, I wanted to let you know that I had got done 0 bridal portraits at this point. Bridal portraits meaning just photos of the bride and the groom, okay? But the reception, it was only 10 minutes away, and I thought that we would still have plenty of time for photos before the winter sun started to go down quick, because in the winter, I think sunset was like 7 o'clock, and at this point it was already past 5 o'clock, and where the reception was, there were some really tall trees. It was like in the middle of I don't want to say a forest, but there were some really, really tall, mature trees surrounding where the reception was, so I know that we had even less light. But again, I was pretty confident that we could do it. So I got to the reception venue, and then the planner comes out to me and says, hey, the couple had to snag a few things from the hotel room, but they'll be here as soon as they can. And I said, okay, that should be fine. You know, we still have a few minutes for photos. We'll be okay. Well, 45 minutes later, as the sun was saying its last goodbyes, they showed up, right? And I knew, like, I was already kind of worried, right? Because they had to then immediately be rushed into introductions, because that's what the timeline said. It was almost 6 o'clock, time for introductions, go into the meal, cake cutting, and all that good stuff. So this meant that we would have to take the rest of the bridal party portraits, or I'm sorry, just the bridal portraits, outside with no sun. Take photos with no sun, okay? No light. No light to take photos, okay? I'm just trying to drill this in. This was the situation that I had to deal with. And if you have a pit in your stomach right now, you're not alone. Okay, and although that this is not like the ideal situation, to tell you the truth, I wasn't worried, okay? So as a professional photographer, you need to know how to shoot in just about any lighting situation, especially for photographers or wedding photographers where you don't have full control of everything, right? Maybe if you shoot in a studio, you don't need to know how to shoot in every single lighting situation. But as a wedding photographer traveling from place to place, you never know what you're going to encounter. You need to know how to light in any lighting situation. And that means including creating your own light with flash. Okay, and I'm not talking about just putting your flash on your camera and calling it a day. I mean creating dynamic light with your flash mounted off of your camera. So what I did was I walked outside, I set up a few lights on stands, and then I just had them come outside, and boom, in 15 minutes, we were done. I got everything that they needed for their bridal portraits. Flash, it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be confusing. But I feel like a lot of photographers new to photography get overwhelmed with Flash, right? It's hard enough to learn the camera by itself. Now you have to learn something entirely new that just changes basically everything that you've set up on your camera. And it can be really scary. And again, it's not. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be confusing at all. And for that reason, I created the course Flash in a Flash. It's to teach you what you need to know to get great light in any situation, including nighttime, in quick, easy to follow videos. That's it. So don't get caught with no light and have no way of capturing what the couple needs. So if you want to check out the course, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link for the Flash in a Flash course, which is about halfway down on the page. The online videos are wonderful. All the feedback that I've got is top-notch stuff. The videos are online. It's an all online course. So you can do it at your own pace. And it's only $49. And then it's yours forever. You can come back at any time. It's not like a limited access thing. $49 and it's yours forever. Okay? Which is a small price to pay to not have to tell the couple that you didn't get any portraits of them on their wedding day because, well, the sun went down. You know, you're a photographer. You should know that the sun goes down every single day. And you should still be able to get photos for them. So that's it. Check it out. Again, beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Click the link about halfway down the page if you're interested. So there you go. Today's guest is Troy Christopher Plota. All right, I'm really excited for this interview, and I'm going to give him a proper introduction in just a second when we get into the actual interview. But when I was listening back to the interview while I was editing, I thought that it may be kind of hard to visualize what we're talking about here in your head. So I want to try to explain what it looks like first, just so that there's no confusion. So Troy created an app, which we'll get into, that lets you add motion to your photos. So imagine a photo of a couple in front of like a beautiful sunset. Okay. Now with Troy's app, Plotaverse, you can add motion to the clouds to make them appear like they're moving in the sky, right? Like a looping GIF that you've seen on Facebook or something. Now, if you need to see like a concrete example, I have a few in the show notes of today's interview over at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. This is episode 120. And in fact, if you're listening on your phone right now, I know that an Apple Podcast app, you can just swipe up on the interview and you'll see a link that you can click on to check it out. Okay? So that's that. I highly encourage you to check out to see what this looks like before we get into the interview. But I know that sometimes that's not possible if you're driving or if you're like going at it at the gym. So I just wanted to give you that visualization in your head. So that's it. Let's go ahead and get into today's interview. Today's guest is a photographer and global leader in motion art. His work has appeared in top magazines including Vanity Fair, GQ, Rolling Stone, and many more. His latest creation is the digital sharing platform and app Plotagraph and Plotaverse. Today we will be talking about what the future holds for photography, and I'm really excited to be chatting today with Troy Christopher Plota. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Troy.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Raymond.
Of course. I mentioned there your intro was quite astounding. If anybody were to have that as their resume, they'd feel pretty good about themselves. But I'm sure that it didn't just start overnight, right? You didn't wake up one day from whatever you're doing and like, hey, all of a sudden I'm a global leader in motion art and photography. Can you start off by telling me about your start in photography?
Yeah, absolutely. It was 30-something years ago. Getting old, Raymond.
Well, you don't look it. You don't look it at all.
Thank you. So I started when I was 13 years old in high school. I had a really great high school that had a great photography program. And I was not a scholastic kid at all, like the opposite. Every year, I was like, I'd graduate to the next class. My parents would be like, by the skin of my teeth. But I found photography and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, just school didn't interest me so much. But got into photography, absolutely loved it. Then, kept growing from there. I became like the the school photographer, yearbook, advertising, all that kind of stuff, and the school newspaper. And when I graduated high school, I just kind of kept going from there. I opened my first studio at 21 years old, and I've been a freelance photographer ever since. And I turned 39 a couple days ago.
Wow, congratulations.
49 really, but 40.
I was going to say, wait a second, that math doesn't add up, but I'm not going to question that. That's hilarious. What a great progression. So it sounds like you just kind of started with a camera around 13. You picked up this camera, and then there was a very quick progression there when you opened up your first studio. I kind of want to know a little bit more about the technical side of your education. What was the hardest part about photography technically for you to grasp and learn?
Nothing. Like it just no, because you just start. I mean, you start I started with film, and it's exposing. And let me okay. So I say that now, but if I'm 13, and you're like, Troy, you're 13. What's the hardest part? Exposure. It's like back in the day we had film. You only had a certain amount of exposures per roll of film, and you had to pay for money for that film. So what I did is I saved up my. I didn't eat lunch. And I would save my lunch money and buy film and paper and stuff. And that's basically how I funded my early years there, of film. So the exposure, because you didn't want to mess it up, right? So I have this roll of 36 millimeter. Oh, hold on. Give me 1 second here. Siri thought I said, "Hey, Siri." I didn't say that.
Exposure, yeah.
Okay. So getting the exposure set. Now that we have digital, that's not really much of a problem because you shoot it and you're like, oh, that's not right. There we go. And I'm not limited to the number of film. So, but starting off with exposure and then in the black and white darkroom, and then just everything's kind of a progression. And what I tell people a lot of times is use, it's just the number of times you shoot the shutter. Keep shooting, shoot the crap out of that shit. Yeah. You learn every time you push the button, you're going to learn something, So it's just putting your time in.
Sure. My next question was going to be where was your main source of photography education, but you kind of seem like the person to where for you, it's all about practice. It's all about getting out there and doing it, and you're going to learn on the job. I, like you, wouldn't say that I was a scholastic kid either. I was very much hands-on, and the listeners of the podcast have heard the story 100 times, but the reason why I got into, at first it was video, was because one of my teachers said that if I made a video proving that I knew the material that we were learning at the time, I wouldn't have to write an essay. And I was like, no brainer, of course I'm going to do that. and ever since then, here I am today. So I love that journey that you had there. Now, I really want to get into this new creation that you have, everything with Plotagraph and Plotaverse. But I think to even start talking about that, we really have to talk about the progression of photography from its beginnings and even before that to where we are today. Can you give us a little bit of a Cliff Note version of that?
Yes. So, photography from when it was invented and, if you go backwards and you're with, sculptures and paintings, then photography comes along and, quickly fast forward through black and white and color and the progression of photography. And then now even into video. Before the past 20 years, most everything's printed. So everything in photography is 2D. So when you take a picture, whether it's color, black and white, whatever it might be, you knew that it was going to be presented in a 2D fashion, or there's no way for it to add any motion to it. So, but now that fast forward to today, for the love of God, hardly anything needs to be a still anymore. And you could just see by what's going on with the brands and the agencies as far as what they're using and the stats behind how much engagement you get between a video and a still. That was my motivation for creating this, and knowing that photographers, I'm just gonna say it, we're in trouble because it's kind of like the value, how many stock images are available out there compared to what used to be, and the value and how much they're selling them for now on Getty and Adobe and Shutterstock and all these other sort of things. It's fallen quite a bit, so it's really hard to make a living in that particular way. So now we knew we've been animating as a team for a long, long time, but it took many different softwares to do it, and it took days sometimes for one image, and even then it wouldn't be 4K export because of the technology. So I said, if anybody ever invented an app that did this in one app and could export 4K, this would be a miracle, right? So, and I kind of was asking around, and nobody really seemed so interested. So I decided, my partner, Sasha, and I, she's my partner in life and my partner in the company. She's the CEO. She's absolutely amazing. We started on this path. And to get here, I sold all of my gear. Like, I got down to no cameras, which I've never had happen since I was 13 years old, to pay for the code. So we kept going. I have cameras now, of course. But to get here, it's like we were all in. I knew this was going to be helpful for photographers, because a lot of times when somebody comes in and they say, oh, I want to do, we have video component, whatever it might be, or a lot of times even with the brands and agencies, a lot of their budgets are going from the stills to the video. So this tool allows for the photographers to compete in the video realm. So now they can add motion to their image. It doesn't have to be still anymore. And they can even add overlays on top of it with music and all that other stuff delivered as an MP4. Now you have an audio component that was never really possible with photography as a 2D form.
Yeah, so let me just kind of deconstruct that here real quick. So what you saw was that in the past almost 200 years, every photo that had ever been taken was printed, and that was the only way to enjoy this photo that was taken. And now here within the past decade or so, you've realized that, wait, there's so much more that we can do with a single photograph. So this is how you came to start on this journey to where you are today.
Yes.
Okay, and that is part of the Plotaverse, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now can you talk me through the app, right? Like where are we going? Not so much like a technical, like how do I use it, but we know that you want to add motion to your photographs, right? But I kind of want to know why, and how are we going to be viewing and sharing these things? Like, for people who have never had the joy of experiencing Plotagraph, what is it?
Okay, so it's basically, you can take any still image, and the algorithm that we've developed, that Sasha and I actually invented, is that you take the pixels and it takes the pixels, moves them forward, and then plays them back around, so it's not distinguishable to the eye. So if you have, let's say, on the easy side of things, organic things like clouds or water, it'll take those pixels and move them in a very natural way as far as how clouds or whatever it might be would move, and it moves it almost like you're looking at it in the photograph, like a video, basically. And then we moved from there, and we kept getting even better with our algorithms, and now we can actually take hard lines, really hard lines, like stairs or whatever it might be, and just animate those in a way that just keeps going forever. The animation can be anywhere from a half a second up to 6 seconds a lot of times, and your eye can't tell where it starts and where it ends.
I see. Okay, so tell me if and please tell me if I'm wrong here. I'm sure that you've been working with this much longer than I have, and you have a better description of it. But for those listening right now, and they're at the gym, right? They've never, maybe they've, I'm sure that they have seen a Plotagraph, but maybe they just didn't know there was a Plotagraph at the time. It's almost like in the most simple terms, like a looping GIF, but like you can create it, you can make it out of a still image, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool, perfect. So I can tell the listeners from my experience, I was just telling Troy before we got on, I just created one of these from my latest wedding. And like you mentioned in that example there, it was a couple that were silhouetted by this beautiful sunset behind them. And it's just the clouds moving behind them. And it's fun because it's this really organic way of looking at something. It's something in a style of photography that you're not used to seeing. And that's really going to make you stand out. And I could tell already just from my Facebook analytics that photo, even though I posted the exact same photo the day before, just as a photo, got more than twice the engagement. People stopping to look at it and watch it. And when your job is creating something that catches people's attention, this is almost like a hack just to get more attention. And it's really fun. I want to know why. Now, you talked there for just a second about the progression of creating the app. I kind of want to know where the idea came from.
Okay. Yes. So I've been doing GIFs since the 90s. um, and what was it? Back in the day, The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, when they did the big freeze.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Remember? I was so like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen. Now I love photography, but I get bored pretty easily. Because after doing it for so long, you're like, what's next? What else can I do? What else? How else? So we were practicing with the big freeze, and then what we would do is we would take images that we were shooting in our studios, and we'd create GIFs with them, and I'd put them on my website in the 90s, and it would get more attention. So this is where it really began. Just knowing that using the base as a still photographer, the bases as the stills, and adding some motion to it is just going to get you more attention, and my clients loved it and all that kind of stuff. But fast forward to now, there's just so many more ways of using it. Now, GIFs to me are kind of becoming obsolete because GIFs technically only hold 256 colors, and a GIF could be pretty large in size, to where an MP4, now this is what I really promote, this is where our whole platform's based on, is MP4s. You can add audio files too. So you're not stuck with just, once again, that 2D image. You can add audio to it, you can add motion, you can add overlays. So now you have all this eye candy that you can add to your base image, which is going to get you more attention. You mentioned you got twice as much engagement on your post. Well, when we first came out, about 2 years ago, we came out. About a year and a half ago, we had one of our ambassadors do a takeover on Adobe's Photoshop's Instagram page. And that year in May, he posted an image. And then when he did the takeover, he posted the same exact image as a Plotagraph on his takeover. It got over 300 times more engagement, more comments on it. And we broke the record for Photoshop's engagement up to date for Photoshop on Instagram.
That's
as far
incredible.
as how many comments they got. Yeah, on the first Plotagraph that they ever posted on Adobe. So it just, hands down, the younger generations have no attention span. They're bored with stills, to be honest with you. This is not going to be the most popular thing to say, but if you can add some kind of motion or action, you're going to get more engagement.
Of course.
And so that's where we're all in on this. And what we're doing is we're promoting artists, we're promoting photographers who use these practices and these apps. And there's other ways of creating animated images too. We just happen to have a few of the coolest ways of doing it. We have a morphing app now too. We are now the top 5 apps recommended by Facebook on their for their advertising platform. We're now actually an official marketing partner with Facebook now too. So they see it. They know the numbers. So like, let's say you go to shoot a wedding. Include, like, for starters, I say, just for starters, include with your package one Plotagraph. It will take you 5 minutes to animate your image. And guess what? The other 10 portfolios they're looking at, or websites they're looking at, don't offer this. So if you can stand out and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to give you a Plotagraph, or I'm going to give you an animated image on top of it, and actually, if you have the pro version, you can throw an audio file on it too. And it just makes it more interesting, and it helps you stand out. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to love it so much. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, I want a couple more. Would that be okay? These other images I would love to see as animated. Sure, $100 an extra image. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Takes you 5 minutes to animate an image. It just gives you other ways to sell your images and to stand out from the crowd.
I love it. So with being a photographer who dealt with a lot of print ads, magazines and stuff like that, you kind of created this new medium here that obviously can't go into magazines. So I want to know, what does the future look like for you?
What are magazines? They're dead. You know what I'm saying? Print. So you just mentioned print. Print is dead. Okay. And I'm in the future. I live in the future. Like right now, we're whatever date it is, October 2018.
Yes.
I'm already 2 years in front. Like that's where I am to keep ahead of stuff. And Generation Z, the millennials, we have no problems with looking at magazines on our iPad. Sure. So usually looking at images now, I mean, think about between print and digital, it's going to be on a screen, and it doesn't have to be still anymore. And if it needs to be still, if they have that component that it is, they still have it printed, guess what? It started with
as a photograph,
a still, so it's backwards compatible. Not with a cinemagraph, though. Cinemagraph's different. Cinemagraph is shot with video, and there's a big confusion on that. I'm actually about to start my own show called The World of Motion Art. And there's so much data that needs to be given. And it's such a new thing that's one of my jobs right now is just putting this data out there for people to be able to use.
I love it. With your new show, are we talking YouTube here? Are we talking a podcast? What is this going to be so we can keep a lookout for it?
Okay, so it's going to be a show on Plotaverse.
Oh,
and
perfect. Of course. You already
so
got the
we already
platform.
have our own platform, but it will be available also on YouTube. We're going to put it on YouTube too. And once again, I'm just going to give all the data I can, just whatever I can do to help artists. That's my passion.
I love it.
And I am shooting. It's like I shot Kai Lenny a few weeks ago, surfer. I'm living in Maui now. Sasha and I are living in Maui. And my next goal, my dream really is to go to Apple or Disney and say, listen, we have a really cool idea for a show where we fly in the world's top creators, whether it's actors, models, photographers, and setting up an assignment for a motion art assignment. And they shoot around Maui. Because there's so many cool things here to shoot. There's like 18 different microclimates just on this island alone. We could do like seasons without even running out of, concepts and stuff. So that's kind of one of our things. And once again, to show also the brands and the agencies how valuable this is. And then the way Plotaverse is set up, if you notice within our filters, the brands and the agencies sit next to the creatives. Mm-hmm. We don't separate them. They're together. And we're like, brands meet the artists, artists meet the brands. And so that way, if they're looking for, creative directors looking for inspiration on next campaign, Plotaverse is the perfect place to view the motion art, because we have now over 500,000 posts on Plotaverse, nothing but motion art, whether it's morphs, cinemagraphs, plotagraphs, time lapses, whatever it might be. Anything that sits in between that still image and that traditional video is called motion art. And that's what this whole platform is made for, is for motion art, for motion artists. So it's a great way to get exposure. And once again, Instagram has 1 billion monthly users now, or something crazy like that. So if you're new, like, how are you going to catch up? How are you going to get discovered? So we're kind of coming in off to the side going, listen, we know, like, all of our people are on Instagram too. It's like, get your stuff here. You have a niche place to show your work, and hone in on just motion art, hone in on what your competition is doing, and get inspired. And then, from there, you can share from Plotaverse out to your other platforms too.
So cool. So cool. I love it. I want to know, you've had quite a journey here, 30-year journey. I want to know that if you just had to start all over again today, right? You woke up, you're 13 years old, you have this camera in your hand. Is there anything that you would have done differently to get to where you are today faster?
No.
You've been very happy with your journey from.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I guess that brings me to another question, right? I didn't really go too far into this there in the beginning. You talked about at 21 you opened up your first studio, and then I talked about how you've shot with celebrities in magazines. I want to know that gap. I want to know that gap right there. How did you go from opening up the studio? What were you focusing on? And then how did you get to the point to where you were working with very well-known talent?
Enjoying today's interview with Raymond's guest? Want to hear their full interview and gain access to more monthly educational photography tutorials? Become a premium member of the podcast. There is no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. To sign up, head over to patreon.com/Beginner Photography Podcast, or by clicking the banner on beginnerphotographypodcast.com. Sign up and start taking better photos today. Now, let's get back to the interview with Raymond's guest.
When it comes to new photographers, right? I'm sure that you are in circles of other photographers and seeing these newcomers coming up. Is there any miss or bad information that you hear being taught to them that you think that they should ignore?
That's a really great question. Gosh. Oh man, there's a lot of them. Where do I go? I think really honestly is a lot of photographers are putting so much attention on Instagram and spending so much time on Instagram and posting every day because like the algorithms or whatever
Sure.
kind of BS you want to really talk about, like that whole thing, which makes sense for Instagram because it is relevant. But post just your best stuff. Like don't sit there and think you have to post every day. Really just put your best work out there. That's the best advice I can give instead of like posting mediocre stuff. You really want to put your best foot forward and, create a really nice website and be really thoughtful in what you show.
That's cool. That's a great tip right there. And I think a lot of the listeners are really going to resonate with that because, like you said, I mean, there's so many people who just feel like every single day social media can get, especially with Instagram, if you have to do this and follow these rules, it's no longer fun and social.
Right.
I love that.
And it's no longer conducive for you showing your best work because if you have to, every single day, you're like, well, I just shot this wedding or I just shot this fashion shoot or whatever, and we're going to shoot thousands of images, and I'm telling you, we're going to get like a couple of great ones because that's the odds. Basically, that's how it works, But if you're under the pressure of every single day, it's not a bad thing to be, to put that on you a little bit, but it shouldn't be a rule, like if you're putting something out there just to post it because you think you have to post on Instagram or wherever it might be once a day and you're not proud of it, don't post it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great tip. That's a great tip. On top of the misinformation that you hear being taught, have you ever got a piece of bad information or have you ever had a failure that actually set you up better for success?
Let's see here. A failure. I have a lot of those for our tech company. That's where it's like we got so much information off the bat when we first came in that was dated. Like in the tech industry, it's just things happen so fast. Photography wise, I don't know. Okay, so a lot of my competition would get into that job and they would nickel and dime the customer. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether it's the agency or whatever it is you're shooting for. My goal through my whole career was relationships. It was about over delivering, giving good value, and not just working it as though this is the only time you're going to work for this person.
Yeah.
Or to not know that they're going to have other jobs for you down the line. So really work it, relationship. That's the most important thing, because you never know who's next or who can turn you on to something.
That's a great tip. That's something that I think gets overlooked a lot of times, even by myself included. So thank you a lot for sharing that. Troy, is there anything that I didn't ask today that you think that the listeners should know?
No, you did a really good job. I've been doing a lot of these, and seriously, you did a really good job. Now, this is, we got a lot of information out there. Anytime you want me back, I'll come back and we can do some more chatting and stuff like that. But, it's just, keep inspired and keep shooting the things that inspire you. Okay, if you were to say, where did I go wrong? Or like, what are the things that, God, it's hard because there are assignments that you start taking, start married, having kids, all this stuff and all of a sudden you start finding yourself on a path of shooting things that you didn't get into photography to shoot this, but you're doing it for the money. So try to keep it, especially at the beginning. You have this luxury of not having that probably at the moment. So just shoot the things that you love. If you're a people person, shoot people. If you're not, you like, still objects or whatever it might be a product photographer and really shoot that and really love it and shoot the things that you have a passion for.
Troy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. Can you let the listeners know where they can find you online or find out more about the Plotaverse?
The fastest way is if you're on the App Store or the Play Store is to search Plotaverse, and then that's where our apps are under Plotaverse. And then if you're on desktop and you're interested in our pro version, plotaverseapps.com. And that will show you the whole world of Plotaverse and the apps that we're making and the ways to get discovered and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect. Again, man, thank you so much for coming on. I really look forward to spending more time in the Plotaverse, implementing those ideas that you talked about today, and just seeing the change that it makes and bringing a little bit more fun back into photography. So again, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So what do you think, man? Are you going to give Plotaverse a try? I can tell you that since the interview, I've made a few more Plotagraphs, and I can tell you that it's just fun. You know what I mean? Like, you go out there and it just extends that fun. You go out there and you have a good time shooting, and then you get back, and you always, culling, picking out the photos that you want to edit is not always the most fun job. But then when you go through looking for a photo with the intention of bringing it into Plotaverse to create a Plotograph, it just extends that fun again. Okay, it doesn't make it like, oh, I got to go through all these photos and pick out the. It's like, oh, now I get to pick the photo that I want to turn into a Plotograph. It's fun. It's just fun to be doing something new in photography, and the engagement on Facebook continues to just beat out traditional photos as well. So that's always a bonus. I really want to hear your take on this. I want to know if you're going to be creating them. It doesn't have to be, if you listen to the premium version of the podcast, it doesn't have to be just for making money. It doesn't have to be to increase your sales, which obviously, like Troy mentioned, can do, and it can do very well. But again, I want to hear your take. So join the conversation in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. I made a Plotograph for you to check out right there, and I would love to see you share a Plotograph of your own. So that's it. All right, guys. That's it for this week. Until next week, I want you to keep shooting. I want you to get out there, shoot as much as you can. If you live in the northern part of the United States, especially the northern and eastern parts, you know that winter is coming, and it is just going to start getting cold, and we're not going to have as much opportunity to get out and shoot here in the next coming months. So get out and do as much of it as you can now while the weather's still nice. So again, get out there, keep shooting, but most importantly, stay safe. I love you all.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. And continue the conversation with Raymond and other listeners of the podcast by joining the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today. Thank you. We'll see you again next week.